I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and today we're in regional Victoria to drive this, the new Nissan Leaf E-Plus. Why are we in a regional area to drive a Nissan Leaf? Well, because the E-Plus finally gives this EV more range for Australia. The standard Leaf is sticking around, with the E-Plus now filling in as the range-topping variant for the Nissan Leaf here in Australia. Now, to remind you, the regular Leaf offered 270 kilometres of range on the WLTP cycle from its 40 kilowatt-hour battery, which put it towards the bottom end of the EV market in terms of flexibility. The E-Plus gives you a 55% increase in battery capacity, 62 kilowatt hour pack underneath this car, which gives you a 385 kilometre WLTP range. Now for Australia, a country with big distances involved, that makes all the difference. You also get more power, it's considerably faster, this car, even though many other elements, including the cabin, totally carry over. But in today's video, before we get out onto some country roads in the Leaf E-Plus, we'll revisit the Nissan Leaf, check out the cabin and the practicality, and then we'll test out the dynamics, the consumption and the range of this EV that costs just over $60,000 here in Australia. But before we get started, make sure to hit subscribe down below and the notification bell. Inside the Nissan Leaf, the cabin is best described as functional. There are many parts of it that are actually quite tidy, including the steering wheel here, which is wrapped in soft leather and it's also heated as standard. Plus, you get seat heating for both front seats and also the rear outboard seats as well, which is rare in a car like this. But much of the design of the car is starting to get a little bit dated, and it's probably where the Leaf, comes across on first impressions as a little bit older in the cabin compared to something like the Hyundai Kona Electric, which is basically the same price as this Leaf E-Plus. That being said, from a purely functional point of view, everything is where you would want it to be, and everything actually does work well. Now, that starts with this touchscreen, which launched for Nissan in Australia on the new Leaf a couple of years ago, and it works well. The software is good, you have shortcut keys down the bottom, you've got wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, navigation, it's all there, and the screen is easily visible even in sunlight. And beneath that, you've got physical climate controls, though the climate control system for this car is unusual. I might be missing something, and you can let me know in the comments if I am. But it seems to be either a choice of cooling or heating, and the temperature dial doesn't really change that. It seems to basically cool unless you press the heat button, in which case the cabin then gets very, very hot. In any case, Nissan advised using the seat heaters rather than the climate heating because it's far more efficient in terms of energy consumption, even if it does leave the air in the cabin feeling quite chilly. On a day like today, I am wearing two jumpers for a reason. Now in front of you, you've got mixed analog and digital gauges. There's a physical gauge for your speed, which is always there, and then a big screen next to that that it can show you your range, consumption, multimedia, and that sort of thing. You kind of know all what's going on there, even if the look is, it's dated, no doubt about it, in terms of design language. Between the seats, we've got the Leaf's rather unique shifter. It's had this design cue since the very first model was introduced, and you get used to how the changing of direction works. Also dedicated switches for e-pedal, because the Leaf does have one pedal driving, but you can turn it on and off at will, which is kind of cool. Some storage between the seats, cup holders, a bin, one USB port, and what looks like wireless charging beneath that, but it isn't, it's just a tray for your phone, and bottle holders in the doors, alongside the Bose premium audio speakers, which actually do sound pretty good. Now the seats themselves, to be honest, they're a little flat, the squab is a bit short, there's no electric adjustment or memory. So it's 60 grand, it doesn't feel that luxurious, but we can't really compare this car to a 60 grand Audi, for example, because it's a full electric car. There are no government incentives on EVs in Australia, and that's what makes them so expensive here. But compared to other 60 grand EVs, things like the Kona, you do want to make sure you shop around to find the best car that you can get for that price. And on that note, let's have a look in the back seat. Now, a big plus to the Leaf E-Plus is that the back seat is actually surprisingly roomy in this car. I've got the driver's seat set in my position and my legroom is good. I'm 6 foot tall, headroom is totally fine. And even though there is a big battery underneath the floor plan of this car, the actual floor height isn't that bad. My legs are pretty much supported by this seat base, and that's better than in a lot of other EVs, including the Tesla Model 3. I think the back seat of the Leaf is definitely more comfortable. Now, we don't have air vents here in the back, which in high summer in Australia would be a frustration if you are going to be using these back seats for carrying people. Or animals in fact, but we do have heating across the seats here, so for winter, like today, that's very nice. And we have a control here on the back. Now, note it is only one control for the whole thing rather than individual controls, but hey, it's still a pretty nice feature to have on this car for toasting the buns. Now, no armrest between the seats. We do have a little bit of padding on the doors. Most of the rest of the materials are hard, but people traveling in the back also get their own bottle holders. Around the back of the Nissan Leaf, the E-Plus looks exactly the same as the standard Leaf, which continues on as a part of the range and is about $10,500 cheaper than this car. In fact, there's only two ways to tell an E-Plus from outside. Around the front, there's a little blue finisher down the bottom, and the really eagle-eyed Nissan Leaf spotters among us will notice that there's been a 5mm increase to the ride height. And actually, looking at the car from afar, you can notice that. The reason that's there is to accommodate the bigger battery pack without stealing any space from the interior or stealing any space from the boot, which continues to be 435 litres, which is actually quite practical for a hatchback like this, significantly more than a Volkswagen Golf, for example, which is always kind of a bit of a benchmark. It's a deep space. Some room is taken up by the Bose system here in the back, and underneath the boot floor, you won't find a spare wheel. Now that does limit the touring capability of the Leaf a little bit, but you know, you do end up with more space, I suppose. You also get a nice hardy cargo cover up any of your valuables, some netting, space to store the charging cable for home, manual tailgate, but very light and easy. So what's the Leaf E-Plus like to drive? Well, quite a lot faster to start with. If you already own a Leaf, the first thing you're going to notice when you start driving the car is that it's just more responsive and quicker pretty much everywhere. Of course, that's long before you tap into the longer range, which is the other big selling point and probably the main selling point of the E-Plus. But the motor has both more power and torque. There's 160 kilowatts of power in the Leaf E-Plus compared to just 110 kilowatts in the standard version of the car. So that's a big jump. That's like a 50% jump in power. Torque also grows, but in a more shallow way, from 320 newton meters in standard form to 340 newton meters here. Either way though, it results in the 0 to 100 time for the Leaf falling from 7.9 seconds in standard form to 6.9 in the E-Plus, so it is actually starting to get quite quick. Now, as is often the case for EVs like this, pace up to 60 is awesome. It starts to tail off a bit after that, and then particularly after around 110, 120, it's not going to get that much quicker. But Nissan did work on the 80 to 120 response of the Leaf E-Plus, and as such, if you do live in the country and you do a lot of overtaking and you just want that extra confidence, the E-Plus is definitely the one to go for. It's noticeably quicker. Now, compared to something like a Kona electric, there's a little less torque in the Leaf, but power is about the same now that the E-Plus has come out, and there's sort of this emerging category of more affordable everyday EVs like the Leaf E-Plus that all seem to be around that 150, 160 kilowatt mark, which is definitely enough power. I mean, that's the same kind of power that we would be associating with entry-level hot hatches. Now, I'm certainly not saying the Leaf Plus is a hot hatch, nor is it a Nismo product, but it gets along very smartly. But of course, the main selling point for the Leaf E-Plus is going to be the greater range, and 385 kilometers WLTP is nothing to sneeze at. Now, it's not the most efficient EV out there. A Kona electric is considerably more efficient with a similar size battery pack, but it's certainly an improvement in terms of day-to-day flexibility compared to the standard Leaf, and 62 kilowatt hours in terms of battery size is good in this car. And they also managed to do that without changing the shape and size of the battery pack too much, so there's really no noticeable difference in packaging between this car and the standard car. So that's a nice little advancement that the Leaf has come in for over the years. Some other things have changed too. CHAdeMO is still the only charging port solution on this car, whereas most rivals have Type 2. But the maximum DC charging speed for the Leaf E-Plus is 100 kilowatts compared to 50 kilowatts in the standard car. That being said, it only touches that 100 kilowatt peak for a very brief window, because charging from 20 to 80% of range in this car still takes 45 minutes on a 100 kilowatt charger, so that's not that quick really. And when you've got other manufacturers talking about bringing out EVs that won't be that much more expensive than this car, but will support 350 kilowatt DC charging, it does leave you wondering what position cars like the Leaf will fill in a few years from now. And personally, my guess is that the Leaf will either transform into a really excellent new generation in the near future, or it will sort of be replaced as a concept with cars like the upcoming Nissan Ariya, which again shouldn't be that much more expensive than this car, but will offer greater range, more space, a far more modern interior, and even more power with things like all-wheel drive. And you know, the Ariya is shaping up to be something special, but it's not here yet. What we have in front of us is the tidy Nissan Leaf. Now, it drives in a really inoffensive way. The steering is actually not bad. It's actually decently weighted and fairly precise. I mean, there's no road feel at all, but it's precise. You can plot a line through the corner with absolutely no difficulty. The visibility out of the car is good. You feel confident driving the Leaf E-Plus, I reckon, particularly now that it has, you know, power in reserve for driving on country roads like I'm doing now. But the chassis isn't capable of all that much more than that. It certainly doesn't really give you any desire to push on and start finding the dynamic limits of this car, which are low. Not that we would ever rate it on that as a key criterion. The Leaf is a sensible EV. It's certainly not the latest in terms of EV tech. Something like a Tesla Model 3 has a lot more driver engagement to it. Now, as I mentioned before, the Leaf offers one pedal driving, but it's switchable from right here ahead of the direction shifter in the car, which is quite nice. So on a country road, if you actually want to coast when you lift your foot, which personally I do, you can turn it off. I mean, it defaults to off, but then in town, where you really do get the benefit of one pedal, regen, and being able to modulate the throttle really nicely and precisely, you can turn it straight on instead of having to go through heaps of menus like you normally have to on an EV with selectable one or two pedal driving. Now, in terms of safety features, the Leaf is all right. We've got adaptive cruise, we've got blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alert, we've got AEB, forward collision warning, but we've only got old school lane departure warning, which sometimes kicks in, sometimes doesn't, and when it does, it just makes this strange kind of 80s vibrating noise. You know, it doesn't have that sort of lane centering that we typically look for in cars coming out in 2021, but of course the Leaf isn't a brand new model in that sense. So those are my first impressions of the 2021 Nissan Leaf E-Plus. This is definitely a nice upgrade to the Leaf if what you care about is more power and more range. You know, basically it does what it says on the tin. Though, where they've priced the Leaf in Australia, Nissan have put the E-Plus in direct competition with the Hyundai Kona electric, which delivers significantly more range again and similar power. That being said, the vehicle-to-grid capability that's baked into every Nissan Leaf undeniably gives it something of an advantage, even though we're not quite sure the quantification of that advantage just yet. I'm keen to know your thoughts though. Let me know down below the video what you're thinking about the Leaf E-Plus. Would you consider this car? Do other EVs attract you more? While you're there, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell if you haven't already done so. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.